Hello. Okay, just a little clarity. Most of you did quite well making a connection between Newton Wilberforce and woman, and certainly that connection primarily, again, is faith. Faith that led them to take a most drastic stand against the issue of slavery. Woolman, in his faith, argued most clearly and articulately against the idea of the curse of Cain. Which if you study, if you are kind of a Bible student, it's impossible. And that was the point he was making. This is just fabrication that someone came up with and people are buying into because it gives them some justification for the evils of slavery. And sad indeed. Desiree's baby relied on irony. Kate Chopin always turned to irony as her key literary device. Just a little reminder that this course does build on Comp 2, Intro to Lit. Your short story and poetry terms are posted in the course if you need a little review for whatever reason. And I'll try to do a little more literary discussion as we go along. Kind of tricky this semester, so much easier, so much more enjoyable to do all of this in class for you as well as for me. Today we are talking about individualism. Going back to the Puritans of the 1600s, they fled England and then Holland primarily because they so fiercely believed in the individual. Not a priest or an archbishop or a pope could be some sort of intermediary for you between yourself and God. It was up to the individual. And this all kind of set up this country for the idea of self-reliance that we find in American Romantic thought and literature. One of the quotes on your American Romanticism page, and I hope you're referring to that often. Characteristics of American Romanticism include faith in something inherently good and transcendent in the human spirit. That is, there's something divine, something of the divine in the spirit of each man or each woman. And even the deists, boy, that's a whole nother topic that we really don't have time to explore, who believed still in the idea of so to speak, the Christian concept of God, although removed, not so involved in as did the Puritans, in the day-to-day interweavings of man, certainly believed in this idea of each person's capability of pursuing the best. And that kind of all evolved into a historical viewing of each person as self-sufficient. This idea is important to understanding the American value system. Historically, and boy, I want to emphasize historically, everyone is their own person, not a representative of a community or any other group for that matter. This attitude eventually coalesced into the idea of the American dream, a governmental system of freedom, allowing the highest aspirations and goals of the individual to be achieved via hard work and determination. Again, Crèvecoeur, back to what is an American, captured this idea quite early. He said, "We are all animated with the spirits of an industry which is unfettered and unrestrained because each person works for himself." Perhaps the most famous American individualistic metaphor is that of pulling oneself up by his or her bootstraps. And the bootstrap is that little, hook behind a boot that you can really tug with to get your boot on. And the metaphor means to advance oneself or to accomplish a goal without aid. Perhaps, again, there is no more clear evidence of this individualism than found when studying the American frontier. The reality of the rugged frontiersman crossing the plains in a covered wagon with his gun and his children. The reality of frontiersmen like Davy Crockett, leaving civilization and coming to the wilds of Texas, dying at the Alamo. The reality of frontiersmen like Jack London, risking life and limb to strike out to the Yukon, all attest to this belief in the ability of the individual to achieve. What's the opposite? Collectivism, the practice or principle of giving a group priority over each individual in it. This notion of collectivism has only rather recently become alive in the United States. In 2000, Hillary Clinton famously or infamously, and this depends on your individual perspective, argued that individual mom and dad could not raise their children alone exactly. Her statement, "It takes a village," was much debated. At the core, I think it's this individual focus versus this collective focus that's really split our country in two. It's two very different ways of seeing the world. It really is a key marker as to where you stand on many issues. Do you see people as individuals, or do you first see them as part of a particular group? And I think it's worth pondering for yourself just where you stand on this particular question. Well, one person who had absolutely no doubt as to where she stood was Ayn Rand. She was born in Russia in 1905. The Communist Russian Revolution, beginning in 1905. By 1917, private property had been taken. Her father lost his pharmacy. Everything kind of began falling apart, and she grew up in the midst of this collectivism, communism, extreme collectivism, and wanted out. And by 1925, she managed to escape to the United States. Her most famous works are The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, and they are certainly, all of her works are stories of the dangers of collectivism. They allow her to share her outlook, which she called objectivism. Simply put, objectivism is the concept of a man as a heroic being, with his or her own happiness as the moral purpose in life, with productive achievement as the noblest activity. That's her philosophy. In other words, she believed that when people worked hard for themselves, the outcome would be the most happiness for each individual, if each individual would kind of buy into this philosophy. She argued hard work is healthy. It would lead to a genuine self-esteem. She insisted that other people be treated as individuals. You're going to find this outlook, her philosophy, very much evident in the story you're going to read this week, Anthem. It is classified as a novella. It's not exactly a short story. It's not exactly a novel. It's somewhere kind of in between. It is your only reading this week because it is longer than the general short story. So please, please, please do not wait until Sunday to get going. Hope you enjoy this story, whether or not you see yourself as more of a rugged individualist or more of a collective global thinker. The story is well written, quite cleverly written, to present her narrative argument, her use of a story to present her outlook of life. Don't hesitate to call if you get stuck. Talk soon.